Chapter 21. It was time to leave, but Yang Chen did not have the slightest reluctance to leave. After handing over the responsibility to the old executioner, Yang Chen left the county empty-handed without hesitation. Naturally, all of his belongings were in the merit ring. It was a pleasant surprise to meet Sun Qingxue and Xianxia, and the first meeting with the two women was relatively full of kindness. Yang Chen would not deliberately pursue anything, but it would be impolite to refuse this kind of unintentional good karma. Soon, Yang Chen disappeared from the eyes of the people in the county. After a few months, no one remembered that there was once an executioner like Yang Chen here. At this time, Yang Chen was drooling in the face of a lot of cultivation methods. After coming out of the immortal beheading platform, Yang Chen's acquired spirit root had become full of the 5 elements, and it was full of the 5 elements of yin and yang. Yang Chen had to choose a few entry-level cultivation methods for himself to cultivate. According to Yang Chen's original plan, as long as his fire spirit root was full, he would naturally follow the path of cultivation in his previous life and walk step by step. After all, in his previous life, Yang Chen had also cultivated to the level of Almighty Immortal. With the qualification of the fire spirit root, he could definitely save at least half of the time compared to his previous life. But now, not only Yang Chen's fire spirit root was full, but all the spirit roots plus the yin and yang attribute were full, which made Yang Chen start to think of other ideas. In his previous life, there were quintuplets, each of the 5 elements occupied one and specialized in one. The 5 brothers' minds were interlinked, and they joined forces to form the 5 elements formation. Under the mutual enhancement and restraint, whether it was attack or defense, they were extremely fierce. There was little difference in cultivation, but the enemy was several times stronger than them, and they were not necessarily opponents. That was when the 5 brothers joined forces. Now, Yang Chen had the yin and yang 5 element spirit root, and he could cultivate all the 5 elements cultivation methods. Moreover, it was controlled by one person, which was more advantageous than 5 people working together. Furthermore, he possessed the 5 elements of yin and yang. It would be a waste to only cultivate the fire attribute. Not only that, Yang Chen also remembered the words of the Grand Supreme Elder in the Immortal Slaying platform. He cultivated the great yin and yang 5 elements and did not need the 8 trigrams furnace to be more powerful than the Grand Supreme Elder. Yang Chen wouldn't be able to forgive himself if he wasted such talent. No matter what, Yang Chen was not willing to give up on such an opportunity. Therefore, cultivating the yin and yang 5 elements was Yang Chen's future cultivation direction. However, what Yang Chen was worried about now was the cultivation method. Among the immortals killed by the heavenly court, Yang Chen obtained many cultivation techniques. First would true secret art, second would true secret art, third fire true secret art, 7th metal true secret art, 5th earth true secret art, 10th water true secret art. These 6 true secrets were all cultivation methods that directly mobilized the most basic essence of the yin and yang 5 elements. With their respective attributes of essence, it was simply the best yin and yang 5 elements cultivation method in the world. If the 3rd fire true secret art, 8th metal true secret art, 6th earth true secret art, and 9th water true secret art could be combined, it would be a set of yin and yang 5 elements true secret art. However, there was a condition for this yin and yang 5 elements true secret art. That was, all the yin and yang 5 elements true secret art must be refined. Otherwise, it could not be cultivated at all. It was a pity that although Yang Chen knew most of the yin and yang 5 elements true secret art, there was no place that was easy to enter. Even if he wanted to cultivate these true secrets, it was impossible now. Whether it was the other cultivation methods or the formations, almost all of them were advanced. With Yang Chen's current cultivation base, it was impossible to cultivate at all. The cultivation methods left by the immortals who did not want to be lost were by no means what Yang Chen, who had just started cultivating and had not yet entered the qi refining stage, could covet. Yang Chen could only use some low-level 5 elements cultivation methods to lay the foundation, to replace the yin and yang 5 elements secret art. When he could get the yin and yang 5 elements true secret art, he would start to cultivate the real yin and yang 5 elements secret art. The cultivation method of the second layer of the three purities secret art has absorbed the murderous aura around Yang Chen's body and transformed it into spiritual awareness. However, these murderous aura and killing intent did not disappear completely. As long as Yang Chen was willing, his spiritual awareness could quickly transform into that kind of killing intent. When necessary, it could be used to deter the enemy. It was still a very sharp weapon. Now Yang Chen's spiritual awareness had reached the level of the late stage of the foundation stage. Although the sharp increase in spiritual awareness was only good for cultivation, now there was no killing intent outside the body, the three purities secret art could no longer be so rapid. It could only rely on the skill of small streams to improve a little bit. At this moment, it was still necessary to have the power to protect oneself first. Otherwise, the spiritual awareness was strong, but there was no spiritual power. After all, it was just a hollow carrot. Yang Chen naturally would not make such a mistake. In his previous life, the most familiar cultivation method was naturally the Chunyang Palace's Great Sun Scorching Sun cultivation method. This was the compulsory cultivation method of the Chunyang Palace's Fire Cultivator, and it was also the foundation-laying cultivation method that Yang Chen was most familiar with in his previous life. Yang Chen's first cultivation was this set of cultivation method. When he first started to cultivate the Great Sun Scorching Sun cultivation method in his previous life, it took almost a whole month before he finally felt a trace of spiritual power. But now, Yang Chen just started to cultivate, and his whole body began to produce spiritual power crazily. With hundreds of thousands of times of cultivation in his previous life, the Great Sun Scorching Sun cultivation method had almost become the instinctive cultivation method of Yang Chen, and there was no deviation in understanding or mistakes in cultivation. Coupled with a powerful spiritual awareness that was far higher than his own spiritual power, as soon as he started, Yang Chen felt the most basic spiritual power. Then, the powerful spiritual awareness controlled this little bit of spiritual power and began to flow along the familiar meridians, warming, moisturizing, and opening up the meridians. With this, Yang Chen discovered that the benefits he had gained from the immortal beheading immortal stage were far more than just a little bit of full spiritual root. His whole body's flesh and blood had been greatly improved under the nourishment of the huge life essence of the immortals. The strength of the body and the capacity of the meridians had reached a point that Yang Chen felt incredible. In his memory, when he first cultivated, the difficulty of breaking through the key aperture points was almost not felt. He didn't know if he didn't cultivate, but when he cultivated, he found that his body was even stronger than when he built the foundation. There were almost no impurities in his body, as if his body had been strengthened by spiritual power on the immortal beheading immortal stage, but it was even more effective. One must know that this was the life essence of the immortals, including the Jade Emperor, Queen Mother, and Taishang Laojun. His wide and flexible meridians, in addition to the attributes of his body that were completely compatible with spiritual power, made Yang Chen unable to believe that this was the result of his first cultivation. After completing one cycle, Yang Chen even felt the spiritual power flowing through the meridians in his body. As soon as he opened his eyes, Yang Chen found that it seemed that his ears and eyes had become much smarter than before. In the past, he could only clearly see a distance of a few feet, but now, it seemed that the clarity of his field of vision had more than doubled. Even the movements of the insects and ants under his feet, it seemed that his ears could hear a trace of movement. Slowly getting up from under the scorching sun, Yang Chen felt the overflowing spiritual power in his body and couldn't help but laugh. Then, with a stretch of his finger, a ball of flame appeared on Yang Chen's fingertip, swaying back and forth with Yang Chen's movements, changing its shape as he pleased. Blowing out the ball of flame on his finger, Yang Chen felt indescribably carefree in his heart. The first cycle of cultivation had already stepped into the realm of the first level of qi training in his previous life. Chapter 22. For ordinary people to enter the qi refinement realm, they must first be able to feel the spiritual energy between heaven and earth, then guide the spiritual energy into the body, and be able to successfully complete one circulation to store the spiritual energy into the dantian. Only then would they be considered to have truly stepped into the Qi refinement realm. However, to be able to do this step was considered to have entered the first level of Qi refinement realm. To complete a complete circulation on the first try, even the most talented genius would not be able to do it. Normally, even if one's spiritual root was full and one's comprehension was exceptional, it would still take at least a few months from the start to the completion of this step. During this period, there were a few key acupuncture points that required arduous accumulation of spiritual energy and perseverance to break through. The path of cultivation was not smooth sailing. From the beginning of cultivation to the first level of Qi refinement realm, there was less than 1 in 10. There was no one like Yang Chen who had 10,000 years of cultivation experience. However, after Yang Chen practiced it for a day, he stopped cultivating. The key to cultivating the 5 elements of yin and yang was to balance the 5 elements. Although it was not absolutely the same, it had to be similar. Otherwise, there would be an imbalance. Of course, the best situation was for the 5 elements of yin and yang to be balanced. If not, the 5 elements of yin and yang would be balanced first and then complemented in the future. The Great Sun Blazing Sun cultivation technique belonged to the Yang Fire attribute. What Yang Chen needed to do now was to find a suitable foundational cultivation technique and cultivate all the other 9 attributes. Only then would he be able to reach the stage where the 5 elements in his body naturally coexisted. Yang Chen had a lot of fire attribute cultivation techniques from low to high level, but Yang Chen did not have many cultivation techniques of other attributes. However, the only thing that made Yang Chen happy was that he had a few low-level foundational cultivation techniques of various attributes, especially a foundational water attribute cultivation technique, Surging Waves Water Blade technique. Although the Blue Waves Water Saber secret art was an offensive cultivation method, it was also very general. However, for Yang Chen, it didn't matter whether it was offensive or not. What he wanted was that the Blue Waves Water Saber's secret art could cultivate the water attribute spirit power, and then he could meet the conditions to enter the Xianxia Mountain Medicine Garden. In addition to the 7 steps enchantment killing array at the entrance of the Xianxia Mountain Herb Garden, the other requirement was that the person who entered must have water attribute spiritual power. The herb garden was left behind by an immortal on the Immortal Executioner's platform. Later on, it was discovered and entered, although Yang Chen didn't know what kind of rare spirit herbs were inside. However, the sect that obtained the medicinal garden had been selling a large number of medicinal pills for a very long time. Moreover, the number of medicinal pills that the sect's disciples possessed was enough to make others envious. Presumably, the harvest was not small. There was still some time before his original master, Chunyang Palace, accepted disciples. During this time, Yang Chen could just go and accept the medicinal garden. With Yang Chen's experience in alchemy in his previous life, there would be no problem with medicinal pills in the future, at least before the nascent soul stage. Although it was the first time for Yang Chen to come into contact with the water attribute cultivation method, such a basic foundation-laying cultivation method, in front of a person with the experience of a great principal golden immortal, was still a simple thing. The only difference from the Great Sun Scorching Sun cultivation technique was that the Surging Waves Water Saber technique took a little more time for Yang Chen. 3 days later, the Surging Waves Water Saber technique also successfully completed a cycle and entered the first realm. Although the 5 elements were complete, since Yang Chen wanted to cultivate the Great Yin Yang 5 elements secret art, then it naturally had to correspond to Yin and Yang. Fortunately, he had all 5 foundational techniques of the Yang 5 elements, but he was missing 2 of the 5 Yin 5 elements. He could only cultivate the Yang 5 elements first, and have a little more power to protect himself. As for the Yin 5 elements, he could wait until the cultivation technique was collected and then cultivate. The remaining 3 attributes of cultivation techniques took Yang Chen about 10 days before all of them entered the same realm. In the following days, Yang Chen tried to control the 5 cultivation techniques to run at the same time, and also when they were mutually supporting each other, he wasted a lot of time. At this time, the powerful spiritual awareness played a decisive role. The 5 cultivation techniques were running at the same time. At first it was not used to, and it was extremely difficult to be distracted in 5 places. Several times in a row, he failed because of the inability to coordinate. After Yang Chen wholeheartedly cultivated the three purities secret art several times, he calmed down and relied on his powerful spiritual awareness. Finally, after a few more experiments, he barely managed to run the 5 cultivation techniques at the same time. After the first successful experience, the next thing was logical. After another 5 days, Yang Chen could already familiarize himself with the state of the 5 elements moving at the same time. Strictly speaking, the 5 spiritual powers combined were not inferior to the spiritual power of ordinary people in the second layer of the refining tool. However, after all, it was a separate 5 spiritual powers. If he wanted to step into the second layer realm, the difficulty of Yang Chen was indeed 5 times that of others. Even if there was the convenience of the 5 elements, 3 times the effort would always be consumed. Fortunately, Yang Chen's spiritual root was now full, and he was almost completely compatible with all attributes of spiritual power. Excellent aptitude plus outstanding physical conditions, coupled with super experience, could accelerate the speed of cultivation. In the end, Yang Chen came to the conclusion that the speed of cultivation in this life, if there was no external help, was probably still twice as slow as in the previous life. However, although the speed of cultivation would be reduced, Yang Chen was definitely much more powerful than ordinary people in the same realm. However, the 5 elements were gathered in one body, which had already allowed Yang Chen to have an additional 5 elements great array. Whether it was offense or defense, he was already in an invincible position from the beginning. While rushing, Yang Chen cultivated. The spiritual power in the early stage of the refining tool was too little. Not to mention that he couldn't control the flying sword. Even if he put a flying sword in place, Yang Chen couldn't control it. In this period, under normal circumstances, everyone generally used talisman paper. If it was a weapon, it was naturally the most basic. It might be a little better than the mortals, but it was far from reaching the level of a tool. The most convenient thing to use for traveling was the Azure Cloud Talisman. The Azure Cloud Talisman could reduce his own weight, so it could naturally speed up a little, and it was not very tiring. Since he had already started cultivating, Yang Chen naturally had to use the way of cultivation to solve the problems he faced. Drawing talismans for Yang Chen was a piece of cake. Yang Chen didn't know how long he hadn't used the tool to draw talismans, but Yang Chen was well prepared. He had prepared a set of all the materials. When his spiritual power was slightly successful, he naturally began to draw these simple talismans. When the first talisman appeared in the hands of Yang Chen nodded in satisfaction. If this situation fell into the eyes of those who cultivated to immortality, they would definitely stare with their eyes wide open in amazement. Even the simplest talisman could not be successfully drawn on the first time. The current Yang Chen had an advantage. No matter what kind of talisman he drew, he could use the spiritual power of that attribute, and it was very convenient and free. After drawing more than a dozen Azure Cloud talismans, Yang Chen also drew dozens of offensive Fireball talismans, Wood Thunder talismans, 15-ton talismans, and so on to prevent accidents. When he put these talismans back into the merit ring, Yang Chen's heart suddenly moved. Taishan Laojuan's Heaven and Earth treasure-raising secret art could make the quality higher when refining tools, then would it have the same effect when used on talisman paper? Chapter 23. When he thought of the universe treasure-raising secret art, Yang Chen suddenly thought of a funny thing. It seems that the higher the level of things, the more things passed down by the immortals of the heavenly court, the simpler the name. What first would true secret art, second would true secret art, heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art, earth fiend sacrificial formation secret art, universe treasure raising secret art. As for the cultivation techniques of many sects in the mortal world, they were as powerful as they could be. Things like the Great Solar Heavenly Fire Emperor technique, the Okraine Water Mysterious Origin technique, the 5 Chi Flame Light Bone Refining technique, the Infinite Radiance Flame Heart technique, they were all named as long as they could be and as intimidating as they could be. Compared with those mortal sects that often have long names and can't wait to give their cultivation methods an earth-shattering name, the immortals seemed to pay more attention to the substantive content. A few simple words said the characteristics of the cultivation method. It was estimated that if it wasn't for the sake of distinguishing the origin, Taishang Lao Jun could directly name the universe treasure-raising secret art as the treasure-raising secret art. The three purities secret art seemed to be what he did, and the old Lord Pill technique, named by Yang Chen, didn't even have a name. However, this was just something that Yang Chen thought of by chance. It was just a trivial matter. What Yang Chen wanted to know now was whether the universe treasure-raising secret art had any effect on the drawn talisman. Strictly speaking, now Yang Chen had a lot of cultivation methods in his mind. Almost all of them were high-level cultivation methods. Only those learned from the Taishang Lao Jun, whether it was the three purities secret art, or the universe treasure-raising secret art, or even the old Lord Pill technique, could be cultivated from the beginning of the qi refining and could be used until the realm of the Taishang Lao Jun. The effect would increase with the improvement of the realm of the cultivator. In the end, this was the real thing that money couldn't buy. But even so, the cultivation method of the old lord was not easily understood by a person in the qi refining stage. Originally, the Taishang Lao Jun estimated that Yang Chen would be able to understand the mystery after the Yuanying stage, but he did not expect that Yang Chen had the cultivation experience of the great principal golden immortal. It was very easy for Yang Chen to carefully study the heaven and earth treasure nurturing art. He began to figure out the mysteries within it. It took him at least 2 days before he raised his head with a smile. The Grand Supreme Elder's treasure nurturing art was broad and profound, and he finally understood some basic content. As for the rest, he would have to figure it out in practice. This introductory content was actually the crux of cultivation and the circulation of cultivation techniques. However, this alone was not enough. There were no less than hundreds of techniques in the universe treasure cultivation technique. Through different arrangements and combinations, it could also adapt to a variety of different materials. At that time, the Grand Supreme Elder only recited the incantation, but if he wanted to completely understand what kind of materials were most compatible with what techniques, there was no other way other than Yang Chen's continuous practical experiments. Since he was only at the first level of Qi disciple, he had all 5 elements. Moreover, it was a talisman drawn by Yang Chen himself, so it wasn't particularly troublesome to experiment. Moreover, this kind of low-level thing, Yang Chen's cultivation experience was there. Some things, even if he did not experiment, he could know the effect. A red light emitted from his hand and gently covered the fireball talisman. The fireball talisman only lit up slightly, and then it returned to its original state. It looked no different from an ordinary fireball talisman. Only Yang Chen could feel that the fireball talisman seemed to have undergone a small change when he held it in his hand. The seemingly improved fireball talisman suddenly burned, and a huge fireball flew out, directly blasting a stone not far away into pieces. At the same time, Yang Chen's other hand also flew out a fireball, but it was much smaller than the previous one. Although it also blasted a stone into pieces, it was obvious that the power of the 2 fireballs was different. With Yang Chen's experience, he could tell at a glance that the talisman that had been nurtured by the heaven and earth treasure nurturing art had increased its power by at least 20%. This was also due to the fact that Yang Chen's current cultivation was only at the first level of Qi disciple. If his cultivation increased in the future, the power would increase even more. Of course, it was only limited to talisman techniques. As an experienced person, Yang Chen knew better than anyone else what the power of this low-level talisman meant. While he was feeling proud, he could not help but praise the effect of the heaven and earth treasure nurturing art. However, after praising it, he remembered that this was the cultivation method of the Taishang Lao Jun, so it was natural for it to have such a good effect. Thinking of this, he was not so surprised soon. With this successful experiment, Yang Chen did not care about anything else. He first used the treasure nurturing art to nurture all the talismans he had prepared. In a short period of time, it was impossible for him to have any major improvement. Only then did he start to identify the direction and run towards the medicine garden of Mount Xiangyang, which was thousands of miles away. Xiangyang Mountain had always been a place with verdant hills and limpid waters. However, for some unknown reason, the spiritual qi here did not match the scenery. Therefore, there were not many cultivators here. Even though the scenery was beautiful, it was deep in the mountains and old forests. There were no mortals around at all. This also led to the growth of wild beasts. Ferocious wild beasts could often be seen. At the same time, this was also one of the reasons why Yang Chen had to prepare so many talismans. With the foundation of Qi Disciple Level 1, Yang Chen did not need to be afraid of these wild beasts. At the same time, it made his movements more agile, which was enough to deal with the complicated terrain here. The lack of spiritual qi was not because of the barren mountains and unruly rivers. It was because of the medicine garden that all the spiritual qi in the surrounding hundreds of miles was concentrated and absorbed. This was something Yang Chen was very clear about. In a dense forest, Yang Chen found an empty space and sat down to meditate in silence for a while. After recovering his spiritual qi and physical strength, he began to look around, looking for the location of the medicine garden. Since he could not fly up to observe, he could only rely on a bird's eye view. It took a lot of effort for Yang Chen to roughly determine the location of the medicine garden based on the direction of the mountains and rivers. This was the effect of the basic formation knowledge from his previous life. Otherwise, he would not have been able to find it. The reason why the sect in his previous life was able to find the medicine garden was because an injured exceptional gold core master accidentally escaped here and found the location by accident. Ordinary people would not pay attention to this place at all. After resting for a while and recovering his physical strength and spiritual qi, Yang Chen stood up and suddenly turned his head in a direction and said, "You have followed me for so long, it's time to show yourself, right?" Following Yang Chen's words, a figure slowly emerged from the top of a tree not far away. There seemed to be some surprise on his face, but more of the surprise and embarrassment of being discovered, as well as anger. "You actually found me?" Chapter 24. As early as Yang Chen finished refining a pile of talismans, he found that he seemed to be tracked by someone. The behavior of the other party was very blatant. His divine sense swept over, as if he did not put Yang Chen in his eyes at all. The divine sense was also not very strong. According to Yang Chen's judgment, it was at most a guy in the third layer of qi refining. Yang Chen did not know why this guy was following him, but he did not care. Anyway, as long as he did not take the initiative to provoke him, Yang Chen did not want to cause trouble. In addition, Yang Chen was also a little afraid of Xianxia. She gave him a pill, but it was accompanied by divine sense. Yang Chen did not want her to know his secret, so he had been enduring. Naturally, this guy also followed him all the way to Xiangyang Mountain. When they were about to enter Xiangyang Mountain, Yang Chen found that Xianxia's divine sense, which was wrapped in the pill, had dissipated. Presumably, the distance had exceeded the range of Xianxia's perception. It was not that Xianxia could monitor Yang Chen from thousands of miles away at any time, but the moment the divine sense was destroyed, it would alert the owner of the divine sense and thus know Yang Chen's position. What appeared in front of Yang Chen was a young man, dressed in very luxurious clothes. He was in his 20s, and his eyes were constantly flashing, as if he was thinking about something. After being exposed by Yang Chen, he was surprised and asked a question. He became angry out of shame and coldly snorted, "Little executioner," deliberately mystifying. "I don't care how you found me, give me the thing that Fairy Sure gave you, and I will spare your life." The thing that Xianxia gave to Yang Chen in the execution ground as a thank you gift was a physique refining pill. This physique refining pill was useless for people who had already begun to cultivate. It could only improve an ordinary person's spiritual root a little, but it could greatly induce the appearance of ordinary people's spiritual roots. At that time, Fairy Sure probably wanted to thank Yang Chen, so she gave him a physique refining pill so that he could have the opportunity to cultivate. However, other people didn't know what it was. They only knew that whatever Fairy Sure gave, it must be something good. The people in the execution ground would not attack a mortal, but they could not stop them from telling the news to their juniors. As a result, some people began to covet the things in Yang Chen's hands. However, Yang Chen soon disappeared, and many people began to search within a radius of several hundred miles. The one who appeared was one of the lucky ones who accidentally met Yang Chen and felt the divine sense on the pill. Are you talking about this? Here you go. Yang Chen casually threw out the body-refining pill that was completely useless to him. He already had a full postnatal spiritual root, so this body-tempering pill was simply trash to him. Moreover, as long as he was willing, he could get as many of these pills as he wanted after he had the herb garden. Body-refining pills? Obviously, this young man was a knowledgeable guy. He stretched out his hand and the body-refining pill quickly flew into his hand. After a little observation, he could see what kind of thing it was. Looking at this medicinal pill that at least needed to be refined after reaching the foundation establishment, the young man was secretly happy. Although it was no longer meaningful to him, he could use it to exchange for some other things, or to give a lot of favors. This trip with Yang Chen was really not a waste. With the vision of Yang Chen as a great principal golden immortal, how could he take a fancy to this medicinal pill that was useless to him? As long as this guy did not hinder his work, Yang Chen did not mind him taking some benefits from his own hands and leaving. Immortals had the mind of an immortal. However, things did not go as planned. Yang Chen thought that the young man would leave after getting the medicinal pill, and he could collect the herb garden as much as he wanted. However, he did not expect that the young man's eyes turned and he had a vicious idea in his heart. You are an executioner, killing countless people. What are you doing here? I think there is something shameful, right? The young man put away the body-refining pill and looked at Yang Chen fiercely. Many people knew that this medicinal pill was given to Yang Chen by Fairy Sure. If Yang Chen casually shouted in the future and accidentally involved himself, it would be very bad. Although the young man was sure that Yang Chen could not recognize his identity, it was better to be safe than sorry. Only a dead man could keep a secret forever. It is my duty to kill demons and to enforce justice on behalf of heaven. The young man shouted in front of Yang Chen in a righteous manner. You want to do evil things here, everyone has the right to punish you, give me your life. He pointed with both of his hands and was about to use his finger sword to take Yang Chen's life. However, he was only halfway through his gesture when his eyes suddenly blurred. A cold light flashed in front of his eyes, and he immediately felt a chill on his neck. He immediately fell into darkness. Yang Chen, who was opposite him, did not know when a ghost head broadsword had appeared in his hand. He chopped down with unusual proficiency, and the young man's head flew more than 3 feet high. Blood spurted out and the body collapsed. Even though the young man was already at the 3rd layer of qi refining, when facing Yang Chen, he still treated Yang Chen as an ordinary person. He did not think about how Yang Chen could discover his existence. He did not use any method of defense, and was directly beheaded by Yang Chen's condensed knife. Noisy! With a flick of his wrist, the ghost head broadsword instantly disappeared. Before the body fell to the ground, Yang Chen casually pinched the small heaven and earth bag on the young man's belt, and with a light pull, the heaven and earth bag was in his hand. If you want to kill me to silence me, then kill me to silence me. Why do you need so many excuses? What came out of his mouth was a lecture, and Yang Chen did not care about anything else. You say one thing but mean another, and your actions are inconsistent. You don't need to wait for the 3 disasters to come, and you will die without a burial place. There is no difference whether you die earlier or later. Go in peace. Lightly pinching the heaven and earth bag, Yang Chen casually threw it into the merit ring. A mere 3rd layer refining tool guy was even greedy for the body refining pill. What good things could he have that could make Yang Chen look at them? It was unknown how long the medicine garden left behind by the unknown mountain god had existed, but it could not be less than 1,000 years. One had to know that even the lowest level mountain god had ascended to the spiritual realm before ascending to the immortal realm. The time spent in this process could only be more than 1,000 years. Quickly walking to the location that he had scouted, Yang Chen spread out his divine sense. After sweeping around frantically, a smile appeared on his face, and he strode toward a thick tree. Seeing that he was about to hit the tree, Yang Chen still walked forward without stopping. Just as his foot touched the tree trunk, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. Above Yang Chen's head, a huge dome suddenly appeared, as if he was already in the middle of a large hall. On the dome, 49 flying swords were distributed into a regular pattern, as if 49 fierce enemies were waiting to devour people, quietly watching Yang Chen's movements. Chapter 25. 49 flying swords in 7x7 formed the terrifying 7 steps killing array of Yang Chen's previous life. This was left behind by the mountain god of the heavenly court before he ascended, but for some reason it was not passed down. Not to mention that Yang Chen's current qi refining first layer cultivation base, even if he was in the early Yuanying stage, if he took a wrong step, he would also be destroyed by these 49 flying swords. In his previous life, the sect that discovered and captured the Xianxia mountain medicine garden paid the price of several Yuanying stage cultivators. What Yang Chen was facing now was such a terrifying killing array. However, with a way to enter the array for Yang Chen, there was no danger at all. In this huge hall, apart from Yang Chen alone, there was no one else. It was empty and there was nothing. Only the floor under his feet was composed of regular square tiles, smooth as a mirror, but there was a warm feeling when stepping on it. The spiritual power here has become normal and is no longer as thin as outside. Yang Chen was in the middle of the hall, and it seemed that when he touched the camouflage tree, he was teleported here. The stone slab under his feet should be the starting point to enter the 7 steps killing array. There were 49 steps in total, and each step had a fixed position. Taking a wrong step would result in death. Even if Yang Chen had a well-thought-out plan and even more experience in cultivation, but when he stepped on the edge of death, he could not help but feel very anxious. After carefully taking a few steps, Yang Chen's heart finally sank, and he regained his calmness. Step by step, he stepped into the center of the sword array. Finally, on the 7th by the 49th step, Yang Chen's foot stepped on a white stone, and then his figure flashed and disappeared. Crash! Yang Chen's foot had just landed on the ground, and before he could see where he was, his foot seemed to have stepped on something, and it fell apart with a crash. Under the great surprise, Yang Chen had already opened up his spiritual consciousness and immediately found out what kind of place he was in. He was in a huge palace with a familiar dome above it. However, the palace was no longer empty. Instead, it was filled with piles of corpses of various wild beasts. The huge palace was densely packed with skeletons of all kinds of beasts. Some of them even maintained their original appearance without rotting, while others had turned into a pile of bones. All the wild beasts had one thing in common. They all had a clear sword mark on their skulls, and this sword mark was the cause of their deaths. Very soon, Yang Chen understood that this was where the corpses of the intruders were dumped after the sword formation killed them. However, for a long time, no one had come here. Only a bunch of strong and weak demonic beasts had come here by chance, or they had rushed in after discovering the abnormality of the camouflage tree. Unfortunately, in the face of a sword formation that could even kill a master of the Yuanying stage, no matter how powerful the demonic beasts were, they could not escape. At a glance, Yang Chen immediately discovered that even after death, the corpses did not rot. It was obvious that they were demonic beasts that had surpassed the Foundation establishment stage. There was a giant snake that was at least 10 feet long, and there were 2 wings on its back. At first glance, one could tell that it was a flying snake. Although the flying snake was dead, except for a wound between its eyes that was pierced by a sword, its snakeskin was intact. The 2 long and narrow wings were also there, but the flesh had dried up. Inside the snakeskin, there was a complete set of snake bones. It was just that he didn't know where the Naiden had gone, but he couldn't see it anyway. There was a huge golden rock with a wingspan of almost 10 feet, and there was also a scar on its head. The golden feathers on its body were still standing, maintaining its appearance when it was alive. The flesh was also dried up, leaving only the bones, and the Naiden had also disappeared. There was a huge tiger, maintaining the posture of roaring at the sky. The tiger skin was intact, the tiger bones were also intact, and there was no Naiden. There were actually more than a dozen skeletons of this level. This made Yang Chen extremely surprised. He originally thought that it was just a simple medicine garden, but he did not expect such a surprise. There were a few skeletons among them. Yang Chen could tell at a glance that they had even surpassed the Jedon stage. The remaining few were also in the foundation establishment stage. The bones of these demonic beasts were all powerful refining materials, and the remaining flesh and feathers were good things that could only be encountered by luck. The only thing that made Yang Chen feel regretful was that the Niden of these powerful demonic beasts had disappeared. It may have been absorbed by the array of this medicine garden and turned into pure spiritual power, becoming nutrients for the medicinal herbs. Hurriedly put all the skeletons into the merit ring, Yang Chen was relieved. The remaining skeletons were ordinary beasts. One step on them would cause them to rot. They were definitely not good things. These things Yang Chen naturally disdained. After his spiritual awareness swept around, he did not find anything worth collecting. Yang Chen began to carefully observe. Since this was the gateway to the medicine garden, then there must be a passage. Soon, Yang Chen found a piece of white stone under the main hall that was exactly the same as the one he stepped on in the sword array. After looking around and finding nothing unusual, he once again stepped on the white stone slab. Schwa, the scenery in front of him changed again, and it seemed to be in a small room. In the room, Yang Chen first saw a transparent bottle, which looked very delicate, placed on a white stone platform. At the bottom of the bottle, he could clearly see a shallow layer of blue water stains, which seemed to be about to dry up. Seeing this, Yang Chen finally determined that he had entered the core of the medicine garden. The bottle in front of him was the control center of the entire medicine garden. At the same time, it was also the source of spiritual power for the growth of all the medicinal herbs in the medicine garden. This bottle was refined by the immortal. It absorbed the spiritual power from the radius of 100 miles. After it was concentrated here, according to the rules set by the original owner, it provided the spiritual power needed for the growth of the medicinal herbs in the medicine garden. Collecting this bottle meant that the medicine garden of Xianxia Mountain would become Yang Chen's. In his previous life, the sect was said to have used 4 masters of the Yuanying stage to collect this bottle. However, Yang Chen did not have to go through so much trouble. Before the mountain god died, he told Yang Chen the method to collect the medicine garden. With this method, Yang Chen collected the medicine garden almost effortlessly. Of course, the most critical part of the method to collect the medicine garden was the water's spiritual power. Although Yang Chen's current cultivation base was only at the first layer of the qi refining stage, it was more than enough to use the method to collect the bottle. When Yang Chen used the method to hit the bottle gave off a soft light and then fell into the hands of Yang Chen. Holding the bottle, Yang Chen's mind moved, and his body immediately appeared in a huge medicine garden. With just a glance, he immediately froze in place. Chapter 26. No matter who it was, when they saw the main ingredient for refining the building foundation Dan, in the city square, each of the profound yang fruits worth at least hundreds of jin of low-grade spirit stones, like cabbages planted all over the field of vision, they would be like Yang Chen, shocked and dumbfounded, unable to speak a word. The reason why the building foundation Dan was precious was because the profound yang fruit production was scarce. It was hard to get even with money. A brilliant alchemist with a profound yang fruit could at most refine 2 building foundation Dan, which also led to the high price of the building foundation Dan. However, in front of Yang Chen, at a glance, there were at least dozens of acres, all planted with profound yang fruit. Furthermore, he didn't know what method the mountain god used, but the mysterious yang fruits, which were hard to grow and hard to survive, were all flourishing with leaves. At the top of each tree, there was a bright red mysterious yang fruit, like a small red lantern. So many profound yang fruits, I am afraid there were tens of thousands of them? Yang Chen simply could not imagine, with these profound yang fruits, how many building foundation Dan could be refined. If so many building foundation Dan all appeared in the city square, how many building foundation experts could be created? With a stretch of his hand, Yang Chen picked a profound yang fruit on the side of his hand, put it in front of his eyes and carefully looked at it. This profound yang fruit, compared to the one Yang Chen had seen before, was at least 3 times bigger. The ordinary one was only the size of a strawberry, but in Yang Chen's hand, It was the size of an apple. Holding it in his hand, he could even feel the heavy pressure. These profound yang fruits were almost certain, all of them were more than 1,000 years old. In this way, the medicinal effect could almost be stronger by 10 times or even 100 times. But was this really the profound yang fruit? Looking at this bright red and tender profound yang fruit, Yang Chen seemed to have a big appetite. Without thinking, Yang Chen put the fruit in his hand into his mouth and took a big bite. A familiar sour taste directly filled his mouth, making Yang Chen's facial features sour into a ball. This was the taste of the profound yang fruit skin. It was not bad at all. The taste of the building foundation Dan was so unpalatable because of this reason. However, Yang Chen still needed to confirm. After spitting out the skin, he took another bite, biting the entire skin, revealing a strawberry-sized red core. Gently touching the core of the fruit with the tip of his tongue, the sweet taste immediately made Yang Chen feel refreshed. Yes, this was the taste. After confirming it, Yang Chen bit the core of the fruit, chewed it a few times and swallowed it into his abdomen. In his previous life, how could Yang Chen be willing to spit out such a thick skin? Although it didn't taste good, it was still an important ingredient for alchemy. Although the core was the most important part, the sour skin contained at least 20% of the medicinal effects and 30% of the spiritual power. Regardless of which alchemist, when refining the building foundation Dan, would not be willing to separate the skin. Even if it was sour, it was necessary to make the best use of it. But now, in the face of at least tens of thousands of profound yang fruit, Yang Chen could finally taste the pure taste of the profound yang fruit. The sweet juice, coupled with the tender texture, was really a rare delicacy. After eating it, there was actually a feeling of wanting more. However, Yang Chen also knew that this profound yang fruit was not so easy to eat. After satisfying his appetite, Yang Chen began to refine the powerful medicinal power contained in the core. The 5 elements cultivation method began to circulate at the same time, divided into 5 directions, madly absorbing the spiritual power of the profound yang fruit. The profound yang fruit, which had been growing for thousands of years in the medicinal garden, was simply like a fiery golden Dan, continuously releasing medicinal power. The 5 kinds of cultivation method opened, 5 vigorous spiritual power quickly entered Yang Chen's meridians. Following the 5 cultivation method routes, began to circulate. Under the stimulation of the 5 elements, this spiritual power began to slowly grow. After a while, Yang Chen felt the full feeling of spiritual power filling his meridians. The huge spiritual power began to flow along Yang Chen's meridians, madly rushing to his limbs and bones. In the end, the meridians of Yang Chen's whole body were filled with 5 vigorous spiritual power. But the profound yang fruit's medicinal power had not yet completely dissolved, and was still constantly releasing spiritual power. The building foundation Dan was used after the Qi refining large success to attack the foundation building foundation. The spiritual power contained in it was enough to support a Qi refining large success expert to attack the foundation building foundation several times. Right now, Yang Chen was only at the Qi refining first layer, but soon his spiritual power had risen to the limit of the Qi refining first layer. If it was in his previous life, Yang Chen would definitely use this powerful spiritual power to attack the Qi refining second layer. But now, Yang Chen only cultivated the 5 elements cultivation method. He had not yet begun to cultivate the Yin 5 elements cultivation method. He did not want his Yin and Yang to be out of balance. In a hurry, Yang Chen began to reverse the 5 elements. He knew that the Yang 5 elements cultivation method slowly began to consume more and more spiritual power. The 5 elements restriction, a very shallow truth. The 5 different attributes of spiritual power all met their own nemesis. The turbulent spiritual power began to be like a millstone in the reverse Yang 5 elements cultivation method, slowly consumed. Even so, the medicinal power of the profound yang fruit made Yang Chen spend a full half of the day slowly consumed. What surprised Yang Chen was, after the reverse 5 elements cultivation method, the spiritual power was crazily consumed, but in the later stages, there was only one of the 5 elements of spiritual power, and no matter what, it could not be eliminated. Yang Chen paid special attention to the remaining small 5 elements of spiritual power, and was immediately surprised to find that this pure 5 elements of spiritual power, after the tempering of the spiritual power, seemed to become more condensed and pure. The quality of this spiritual power was more than 5 times the previous spiritual power. The Great Yin-Yang 5 Elements Secret Art, the cultivation of the 5 elements, increases spiritual power. The reverse cultivation method consumes spiritual power, purifies and refines. No matter what cultivation, there will be great benefits. This is what Yang Chen just discovered. And Yang Chen also discovered one thing: the reverse 5 elements cultivation method can even conceal one's own cultivation. This is another benefit that made Yang Chen overjoyed. In this way, his plan to sneak into the sect has a bit more confidence. The medicinal power of the profound Yang fruit core was exhausted, and Yang Chen also stopped. In the body meridians, there was still a little fullness. The whole body was hot, but it was as if he had just been in a comfortable sauna. The mouth was still full of fragrance. The unique taste of the profound Yang fruit core was still in Yang Chen's mind. This one went down the stomach, the cultivation, and the body was indescribably comfortable. With a light breath, there was even a fragrance directly from the mouth into the stomach, making people can't help but linger in this rare delicious taste, like the kind of wine to slightly drunk. It seems that this fruit is most delicious when eaten without the skin. Yang Chen looked at the endless profound Yang fruit and couldn't help but let out a sigh that made countless people want to beat him up. Chapter 27. After walking through the Xianxia fruit medicine field, Yang Chen saw another scene after a few steps. This time, it was no longer a large number of medicinal materials, but a few medicinal materials scattered on a mountain. In this medicine field, there were different topography and even different weather conditions according to the requirements of different medicinal materials. In short, it was the most suitable for the growth of these medicinal materials. Although these few medicinal materials were few, Yang Chen saw at least 3 ginseng plants with 6th grade leaves at a glance. Although it was only exposed on the ground and only the 6th grade leaves could be seen, the roots below could not be seen, but Yang Chen could almost conclude with his 10,000 years of experience that the ginseng below was at least 2,000 years old. That was to say, when these 3 ginseng were transplanted into the medicine field, they were already 1,000 years old ginseng. After thousands of years of nourishment in the medicine field, it was estimated that these 3 ginseng were about to become spirits. If one wanted to enter the ranks of the Jedon stage masters in the foundation stage, if one had a good fortune pill refined with 1,000-year-old ginseng, the chances would increase by at least 30%. And these 3 ginseng were enough for Yang Chen to refine 3 nature pills. At that time, whether it was his master or his senior brothers who wanted to break through, they could use it to increase their chances. In this area, there were still 4 knotweed and 7 pieces of Ganoderma lucidum that were larger than a millstone. Not to mention anything else, just these ginseng, knotweed and Ganoderma lucidum were already priceless. As soon as he saw these 4 knotweed that were more than 2,000 years old, Yang Chen remembered the formula of the appearance pill that he got from Chang. One of the main ingredients was the 1,000-year-old knotweed. The better the age, the better the effect of the medicine. Presumably, as long as Yang Chen took out the appearance pill, it would definitely make those women in the cultivation world crazy. Not to mention Ganoderma lucidum. Although Ganoderma lucidum was very common, Ganoderma lucidum that was more than 2,000 years old was a rare treasure. In the case of serious injury, as long as a Ganoderma lucidum pill, it could treat any internal and external injuries below the Yuaning stage, and it could almost be described as bringing the dead back to life. In the other direction, there were large patches of Poria cocos, everlasting grass, 7-spirit fat, Panax notoginseng, Gastrodia alata, and Angelica sinensis. The scale of each patch was no less than that of the mysterious yang fruit. Although it was just an ordinary medicinal ingredient, it was at least 1,000 years old. No matter what kind of medicinal pill was refined, the medicinal effect would be increased by at least several times. Yang Chen could think of any ordinary plant or medicinal material, but he could find almost all of them here. After 1,000 years of nourishment from spiritual power, even the most ordinary plantigo seed had become an extraordinary good item. In the face of such a huge accumulation, Yang Chen could only be dumbfounded. It was no wonder that the sect that had obtained the herb garden in his previous life had suddenly become so powerful. With so many aged medicinal ingredients, how many high-grade pills could they refine? How many experts could they nurture? Even if Yang Chen didn't have to do anything, he could become a millionaire just by selling these herbs. Unfortunately, with Yang Chen's level of qi, even if he wanted to concoct dawn, it was impossible. His spiritual power was simply unable to sustain the consumption of spiritual power required to concoct dawn. At the very least, he would be able to concoct the simplest dawn when he was at the 5th level of qi refining. In the face of a garden full of medicinal ingredients, the only thing Yang Chen could do was to eat a mysterious yang fruit that tasted pretty good raw and use his yin and yang 5 elements technique to increase and condense his spiritual power. Yang Chen was now in complete admiration of his decision to take control of the herb garden first. With so many precious resources, if they were to be discovered by others, Yang Chen would probably have the heart to die. Fortunately, the purifying bottle that controlled the herb garden was now in the hands of Yang Chen, so there was no need to worry. With a thought, Yang Chen disappeared from the herb garden and the purifying bottle appeared in his hand once again. Just as he was about to put it away, his heart suddenly moved. He once again used the technique to store the herb garden and grabbed towards the sky. The huge palace suddenly began to shrink and quickly turned into a small lid that was just enough to cover the mouth of the purifying bottle. As for the shape of the lid, it was a dome. The 49 flying sword that formed a sword formation were constantly swimming above the lid like 49 nimble little fish. A sword formation that could kill a nascent soul stage expert made Yang Chen drool with desire. Unfortunately, his cultivation was too low. Not to mention a sword formation, even if he was given a flying sword, Yang Chen wouldn't be able to use it. He could only look at it with greedy eyes. Fortunately, these things had already been collected by Yang Chen. Although he could only look at them and couldn't use them, it still made Yang Chen very happy. The purifying bottle and the lid formed a world of their own, including the herb garden and the protective sword formation. Henceforth, the herb garden of Mount Xiangyang had an owner. After putting away the purifying bottle and the lid, Yang Chen's figure immediately appeared on Mount Xiangyang. The originally camouflaged tree had already disappeared and Yang Chen was standing in the same place, holding the purifying bottle in his hand. It seemed that he was still immersed in the large-scale herb garden and was unable to extricate himself. Even now, Yang Chen still couldn't believe that such a huge amount of wealth and resources had fallen into his hands. If he had these things in his previous life, he wouldn't have offended a villain over a single cinnabar fruit and caused a series of disasters. Thinking of this, Yang Chen's mind flashed back to his master's beautiful eyes as she looked at him before her death. Then, the scene of his master handing the bright ray sword to him appeared again, causing Yang Chen to feel boundless warmth. Lowering his head to look at the purifying bottle and the lid in his hand, Yang Chen felt the genuine sensation from the purifying bottle. He finally confirmed that he had indeed obtained the most tempting wealth in this world. Casually putting the purifying bottle and the lid into his virtuous ring, Yang Chen's heart finally settled down. In the mortal world, it was impossible for anyone to steal Yang Chen's things from his virtuous ring. Even if an expert could open someone else's Qianquan bag, it would be impossible for them to open the token of the heavenly court. These treasures had completely changed their surname to Yang. Thinking of something in his heart, Yang Chen's mind moved, and a large pile of animal bones suddenly appeared on the ground, densely covering almost the entire mountain forest. These ordinary bones were no longer useful to Yang Chen, so Yang Chen directly threw them together with the bones of that greedy guy on Mount Xiangyang. As for when someone would discover them, Yang Chen didn't care. Calculating the time, it was already close to the day when the Chunyang Palace of his previous life would accept a disciple. If he set off from here and calculated the distance and time, Yang Chen would even have time to visit his parents once, and then go to the Chunyang Palace to become a disciple. Having made his decision in an instant, Yang Chen began his journey. This would be a completely new path of cultivation, completely different from his previous life. The only thing in common was that Yang Chen would still become a disciple of his master. "Master, wait for me, I'm coming." Chapter 28. The Yang family's manor was decorated with lanterns and streamers, and it was a scene of jubilation. From the Yang family's master to the villagers and tenants in the manor, they all looked happy. The young master of the Yang family, who had been away from home for more than half a year, rushed back to visit his parents 2 days ago. The Yang family's master and madam were so happy that they almost jumped up. In addition to being happy, the villagers and tenants all had small rewards, and everyone was jubilant. Of course, Yang Chen would not tell his parents what he was going to do, but he still left his parents at least 50 talismans of various kinds. These talismans were all nurtured by Yang Chen with the universe treasure cultivation's secret art. As long as it was torn, it could be used to attack, and it was used to protect his parents. Of course, Yang Chen would not forget to tell them that in the next 1 or 2 years, the world would be in chaos. In this mountainous area, he had laid dozens of psychedelic talismans in more than a dozen directions. As long as outsiders entered this area, they would be dizzy, hallucinated, and unknowingly leave the direction of the manor. At least during this time of chaos, no one would be able to disturb the peaceful life here. Although Yang Chen's psychedelic talismans were low-level, after being nurtured by the universe treasure cultivation secret art, their effectiveness was greatly increased. The spiritual power dissipated very lightly. Even if a Jindan realm master passed by above, he would only see a barren forest here, and would not find the prosperous manor unless he plunged in. However, thinking about it, why would such an expert attack a bunch of ordinary mortals? The Yang family's manor would naturally be safe and sound. In order to nurse his parents' bodies, Yang Chen tried his best. At this time, he could not refine medicinal pills, but the body-refining pill given to him by Fairy sure came in handy. As the name suggested, in addition to stimulating the spiritual root, the body-refining pill could also temper the body. For mortals, this was a rare good thing. Yang Chen divided the body-refining pill into 2 and gave it to the 2 elders. It was no longer possible for them to stimulate the spiritual root by taking the body-refining pill at this time, but it made the bodies of Yang Chen's parents more robust after being nourished by the medicinal power. The leaves of the profound yang fruit were carefully selected by Yang Chen. After stir-frying them with the method of stir-frying tea, they were given to his parents as daily tea drinks. The leaves of the mysterious yang fruit contained a small amount of spiritual power, which was suitable for mortals to slowly absorb. If they drank this tea often, the 2 elders would definitely not get sick and live longer. After settling his parents down once more, Yang Chen left his home once more. 2 months later, Yang Chen's people had already appeared in Meiqing Mountain, where the mountain gate of Chunyang Palace was located. As soon as he stepped into the foot of Meiqing Mountain, the familiar scenery entered Yang Chen's eyes one by one. Those happy memories from his previous life also appeared in Yang Chen's mind from time to time along with these familiar scenery. There were still a few days before Chunyang Palace opened its gate to recruit disciples, but the town at the foot of the mountain was already full of people who came to try their luck. Originally, there were only a few hundred people in the town, but suddenly more than 2,000 young people and their families came in. Almost all the places that could be lived in the town were crowded. There was such a situation every year, and the people in the town were not surprised. They even regarded this as a way to earn some extra money. Every family had rooms for rent. As for safety, no one cared. Chunyang Palace was about to recruit disciples. Who dared to risk the anger of the immortals of Chunyang Palace and commit crimes here? During the days of rushing and waiting, Yang Chen did not practice other skills except for the 3 purities secret art. The spiritual power in his body had been suppressed to the minimum by his 5 elements reverse secret art, and it was also extremely pure. In this way, the ordinary outer disciples who recruited outer disciples would not find the spiritual power in Yang Chen, and Yang Chen would not have the reputation of bringing skills to the sect. In the expectation of everyone, the mountain gate at the foot of Meiqing Mountain was finally opened. A row of dozens of disciples in uniform appeared one after another, surrounding a small square area inside the mountain gate. The simple entrance test was held in this area. After a while, 6 young people, 3 men and 3 women, walked out of the mountain gate and lined up on both sides. They began to let the waiting young people enter that area one by one to test their spiritual roots to decide whether to be accepted as outer disciples. Yang Chen was in the middle, waiting for the people in front of him to enter the mountain gate one by one. Compared with the expectant expressions on the faces of the young people around him, Yang Chen seemed to be much calmer, without any particular anxiety or hope. One by one, the young people made progress and tested their spiritual roots. If they were suitable, they would report their names and be temporarily accepted as outer disciples of Chunyang Palace. Those without spiritual roots would come out from the other side. There were dozens of outer disciples greeting them. The team of more than 2,000 people was orderly and not chaotic at all. Finally, it was Yang Chen's turn. Yang Chen took a deep breath and suddenly felt a little nervous. Then he immediately shook his head. He had even experienced the 3 disasters and 9 tribulations. It was shameful to be nervous in the face of a small spiritual root test. Suppressing his nervousness, Yang Chen calmly entered that area. Under the arrangement of the inner disciple, he pressed his hands on the formation for testing spiritual roots. After a few breaths, the formation began to show a fiery red color, and at the same time, a number appeared. The disciple in charge of the formation glanced at it and read loudly, "Fire Spiritual Root, 71. As soon as the voice came out, several people immediately began to talk. A fire spiritual root of 71, good qualifications. There's another one. What's your name? Among the whispers, a senior brother who was familiar with Yang Chen in his previous life looked at him and asked loudly, I'm Yang Chen. Yang Chen hurriedly said. Finally, with his rich experience, he suppressed the word, senior brother, that he blurted out. Yang Chen. The familiar senior brother said Yang Chen's name, and suddenly his face became a little strange. He bowed his head and took out a jade talisman from his body. After checking it with his divine sense, he suddenly asked in surprise, You are an executioner? Yang Chen was stunned. When did he become so famous that even the junior disciples of Chunyang Palace knew that he was an executioner? Although he was surprised, Yang Chen still nodded, yes. For Yang Chen, this was not a shameful identity. Yang Chen did not think of denying it at all. A few months ago, you killed thousands of people? The senior brother asked again. This question immediately caused a burst of exclamation from the other disciples. Yes. Since the other party already knew that he was an executioner, he must also know what he had done when he was an executioner. Yang Chen still nodded and admitted it. However, there was already a bigger doubt in his heart. Who was targeting him? Could it be the master of the guy who was killed in Xianxia Mountain? You are an executioner who has killed countless people, and you dare to talk nonsense about cultivation? Are you not afraid of heaven's punishment? Suddenly, there was a loud shout from the side, and the tone was unusually rude. Chapter 29. Will an executioner be punished by heaven for killing people? Yang Chen looked at the guy who seemed to be exasperated and replied faintly. Yang Chen recognized this guy. His name was Sun Haijing, a disciple of the Bright Moon Palace of Chunyang Palace. In his previous life, the Bright Moon Palace and the Fierce Sun Palace, where Yang Chen was, had always been fighting in the dark, and Yang Chen's master was the master of the Fierce Sun Palace. Yang Chen had a fire spiritual root. If he joined the Chunyang Palace, he would definitely join the Fierce Sun Palace. It was natural for Sun Haijing to jump out and criticize him. But Yang Chen felt strange. When did he become so famous that even the Chunyang Palace, which was only a third-rate sect in the cultivation world, knew his name and identity? Killing is killing. Does it matter who I am? Sun Haijing looked at Yang Chen's innocent face and snorted coldly. What's more, you have killed so many people. The Chunyang Palace will not accept a devil like you. I remember that in the Chunyang Palace, there is a sect rule. You are not allowed to kill your fellow disciples. Otherwise, you will be severely punished immediately. Yang Chen faced Sun Haijing and smiled faintly, but it seems that the disciples of the law enforcement hall are always doing things that harm the disciples of the same sect. According to the rules of the sect, should they be punished heavily? Ridiculous. Sun Haijing was furious. The disciples of the law enforcement hall are under the order of the sect leader to punish the disciples who have made mistakes. How can it be counted as killing your fellow disciples? You are an executioner. Just as he said this, Sun Haijing suddenly realized the paradox in his words. The word, executioner, was getting lower and lower, and gradually his voice was inaudible. I am an executioner. Naturally, I am guilty of the most heinous crimes. I find someone to chop off his head on the street when I have nothing to do. It is unforgivable, isn't it? Yang Chen smiled and continued Sun Haijing's words. Then he asked with a smile, do you know what the government is for? Also, what is the use of the execution ground? The executioner was the person chosen by the imperial court to carry out the death penalty. No matter how weak the country was, the executioner was still the representative of the government. As a matter of fact, the law enforcement hall of Chunyang Palace did not necessarily have such a justifiable executioner. If Sun Haijing wanted to make things difficult for Yang Chen on this, he would simply be asking for trouble. But you've killed too many people. In the end, it's against the harmony of the world. Sun Haijing couldn't win against Yang Chen in this aspect. The truth was right there, and there was no use in quibbling. He could only find another way to pursue the matter by killing too many people. There are too many disciples who have made mistakes. The disciples of the law enforcement hall have worked hard to fulfill their duties. Could it be that they have harmed too many of their fellow disciples and harmed the harmony of the world? Yang Chen still used the words disciples of the law enforcement hall to reply. No matter how powerful Sun Haijing was, no matter how much backing he had, he wouldn't dare to say no to the disciples of the law enforcement hall, let alone deny their methods and slander their duties. However, Yang Chen insisted that his duties as an executioner were the same as those of the disciples of the law enforcement hall. Whether a disciple has made a mistake or not, it's all up to the head and the elder of the law enforcement hall to decide. It's not. Sun Haijing just said a few words and immediately found his own mistake. He hurriedly stopped, lest he said more mistakes. Whether the prisoner should be beheaded or not, naturally, it is also decided by the government. Could it be that Dao brother thinks that I, a small executioner, should be in charge? Yang Chen looked at Sun Haijing with an exaggerated expression, as if laughing at his ignorance. At this time, Sun Haijing shifted the topic to the head and the elder of the law enforcement hall, which made him even more embarrassed. Before he continued, Yang Chen had already said loudly, as long as you have killed people, you don't deserve to talk about the cultivation of immortality? I don't know if the fellow Daoists present have killed people, but I know that the head of the Chunyang Palace has also killed people. Do you think that the head of the law enforcement hall is also not worthy? This was an even bigger accusation. Sun Haijing did not dare to comment on the merits and demerits of the head. If you are disrespectful to the head of the law enforcement hall, the Chunyang Palace will never want a disciple like you. Sun Haijing finally found a reason to cling on to, and hurriedly announced loudly. Before the others had time to speak, Sun Haijing had already put his words here, and it seemed to be the kind of words that had no room for accommodation. A disciple next to him, who was also responsible for testing the spiritual root, was a little dissatisfied. He frowned and reminded, "Junior brother's son, it's not your decision to accept him or not, right? Moreover, I didn't hear him saying anything disrespectful to the head of the law enforcement hall." Sun Haijing did not dare to be rude to his senior brother for the time being. He could only turn to his senior brother and explain with a smile, "Senior brother, I'm just afraid that he will fall into the devil's path and tarnish the reputation of the Chunyang Palace." Falling into the devil's path, as long as one is a cultivator, anyone can do it. Does junior brother's son still want to expel all of us from the sect? The senior brother who spoke was very dissatisfied with Sun Haijing's attitude. So many senior brothers were sitting here and didn't say anything, but Sun Haijing was chattering nonstop. Moreover, he was overstepping his authority to make decisions. It was clear that he didn't put everyone in his eyes. His tone immediately became sharp. This, senior brother, didn't he kill a lot? Sun Haijing was stunned and explained with an awkward smile, I'm also afraid that something will go wrong. Junior brother Sun, since you are also a cultivator, why do you care so much about immortal? The senior brother sneered, looked at Sun Haijing, and suddenly asked, Little mortal, how did you know his identity as an executioner? Don't tell us that your divine sense is stronger than that of several senior brothers present, and you can actually find something that they have not found. Sun Haijing was stunned again. It seemed that if he could not explain it clearly this time, he would completely offend so many senior brothers and junior brothers. He could only lower his voice and say with a smile, This is a message from Martial Uncle Li of the Taishanmen. He said that we'd better not accept this executioner. It turns out that in the eyes of Daoist brother Sun, whether Chunyang Palace accepts disciples or not is decided by Martial Uncle Li of the Taishanmen. The disciple who questioned Sun Haijing was hesitating, and Yang Chen had already said loudly with a smile, May I be so bold to ask, is this Taoist brother Li the supreme leader of Chunyang Palace? Or is he a famous elder in the cultivation world? Just one word from him can be obeyed by everyone in Chunyang Palace as an imperial edict? Yang Chen's words directly hit Sun Haijing's weakness. Even in the previous life, when Yang Chen did not have discord with Yang Lan, many people in Chunyang Palace were also very dissatisfied with the arrogance of the Taishanmen. His words directly stirred up the emotions of all the disciples who were dissatisfied with the Taishanmen. Yang Chen, right? The disciple who just refuted Sun Haijing directly turned to Yang Chen. Since you have a fire spiritual root, then Chunyang Palace will accept you as a disciple. Wait. Yang Chen was secretly happy in his heart, and suddenly a shout sounded. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.